Hey guys, and welcome to a new video. Today they released the game balance manifesto in Path of Exile Ultimatum League, and I think that's more of a game Nerf fest. Oh, kind of, cause holy shit, there is so many changes, so many meta stuff is getting destroyed. Whether it's builds, mechanics, farming methods, and all that kind of things, and yeah, I am actually excited about these changes, okay? I know a lot of people will disagree already with me, but personally, I'm always a big fan of things that change the game, change the meta, all of that kind of things. Like, you have to understand that if it actively affects you, you might say, yo, this is shit, you know? Like, what the fuck is this guy talking about, right? For example, if you play, like, if Cast on Crit Ice Nova Assassin is the only playstyle, the only build that you ever liked or played, and now they would nerf Cast on Crit and make it like super bad, you're like, yo, this is shit, you know? And the same counts with like farming methods from the past, like 100% Delirium maps or all these kind of things, right? But I personally do always try to make the positive things out of it, and I think a lot of these changes are not as big as they seem like. But hey, anyways, I would say let's go over, but instead of like reading through all this wall of text, I already did that and wrote down the most important things, and then I actually just want to talk a little bit about certain mechanics or specific topics just in my point of view and how I think it will affect the game overall. Good, I would say let's start with the game balance Nerfesto Ultimate League, I'd say. So balance changes related to the new life costing skill. So these are the new stuff they introduced with like the petrifying blood, the low life version, and reap and all these kind of things. Lowering values, not nerfs, or certain abilities, gems, skills that do more damage when enemy is on low life, since the value changed from 35 to 50%. Ambush and assassinate from assassin, for example. Like, this is obvious, since the threshold of low life is not 35% as it used to be. They changed it to 50%. So as soon as you reach 50%, either you or the enemy, you're on low life, right? And there are certain abilities where it says like, yo, you have like, I don't know, 100% more damage against enemies on low life, for example, right? So that will be like a massive buff if they wouldn't adjust that, because now you have like a 15% increased time window where this is actually active, right? So even though they will nerf the values of how effective that is, it's not really a nerf because it will just kick in way earlier. So this is an obvious change here, right? Then certain passive skills that granted bleeding damage over time multiplier got changed to physical damage over time multiplier to support the new physical dot part of Exsanguinate and Reap. So this is something I really like. So you have to understand, since a lot of people have the misconception that these damage over time effects that will be on, for example, corrupted blood or let's say Reap, on the physical dot part of the skill is a bleed. Like, I thought so too in the start, because the only physical damage over time that I personally know is bleeding, right? But if you compare, like, for example, Poison and Essence Drain, right? Poison deals chaos damage over time, Essence Drain, chaos damage over time. The only difference, Poison is an ailment and will scale with poison modifiers and damage to ailments and stuff like that, while the Essence Drain chaos damage over time will not, because it's not an ailment. And here we have the same exact thing. Bleeding is an ailment, bleeding is physical damage over time, as well as the Reap debuff is also physical damage over time, but it's not an ailment, it's not bleed, it will not scale with increased bleed. And since we only had bleed in the past, there is a lot of things on the tree that says like, yo, 10% increased bleeding damage over time multiplier. This gets now converted into physical damage, so it will count for both bleeding and the new dot that the new skills will actually deliver. So really good on that part. Then this is a great one. The Elder influenced weapon modifiers that grant chance for poison or bleeds inflicted with this weapon to deal 100% more damage have been removed. So these are the item level, what is it, 83 Elder bows for bleed bow or poison and stuff like that, right? In their place, Elder-influenced weapons can now roll a new local poison or bleed damage over time multiplier. So the thing is, what does local mean? In one hand, it could be just with attacks with this weapon have, like, or bleedings inflict with this weapon have 50% damage over time multiplier, or is it just a global all-around stat where it says like just generic 50% increased or damage over time multiplier, right? The second part would be great because then this would scale things like Spectre Shield Throw, if we name it like that, because it's an attack based off your offhand. And there's a lot of things that exactly have this problem, right? Where it says like, yo, this would work, but hey, my skill is not really a weapon attack, for example, now Spectre Shield Throw, so all these stats will not apply. So I hope it's going to be a global local, just based on that it's on the weapon itself modifier, so we can use that on other builds too. And there is another really good thing about that one. So for example, how does it work with applying, like if you shoot, we just stay on a bleed build in this regard, right? For example, bleed bow, and we use what was it, the single target skill, split arrow, and I forgot the name. Should I Google it now? Doesn't matter. So, weird. The thing what I want to say is you shoot multiple times, right? Because you want to apply the highest bleeding that you apply will always count, right? So you have in one time a damage ratio, right? You shoot an arrow that can deal 100 to 200 damage. So the bleeding that you would do with a 200 damage hit would be a lot higher than the one if you hit it with 130. So you have to continuously shoot arrows until you hit this one high rolled bleed modifier, right? And with the weapon, it's as well, right? You have only 60% chance for the weapon to deal 100% more bleeding damage. That means you shoot 3 arrows, right? The first one didn't have this bleeding mod. The second one is a low roll, has like 110 damage roll, but it has the 60% chance active, so it deals double damage, more or less, 100% more, basically, right? But it's still a bad bleeding compared to a bleeding that has a high damage roll and the 60% active. So you just have to shoot a bunch of arrows until you hit this one bleed that is on both rolls, high rolled, and will do tremendous amounts of damage, right? And with these ones, with removing this 60% chance, you just have an overall, this will be always active, and that's why I really like this change. And it will probably also affect the Corrupted Blood. And it might actually be that you then can play with Barrage support, right? You do like Crimson Dance, and now we have finally a Corrupted Blood that will get applied, that also scales from physical damage over time. So you basically fill out this niche that Poison always had an advantage over Bleed, which is endless scaling. So yeah, the bleeding stacks will also be capped at like either 1 or basically 9 or 8 stacks with Crimson Dance, but in the end, with adding Corrupted Blood, you can just like scale as much Corrupted Blood as you can possibly do just with like Barrage support, for example, and maybe scale like insane amounts of single target the longer you're applying these Corrupted Bloods. We're gonna see how that's gonna work out. I'm still positive about this change overall. Then, for example, the chain... wait... There is a line missing, but doesn't really matter. Chainbreaker is now changed. It used to be that the mana regen applies to the rage sustain. That's a normal thing to do if you have Chainbreaker. But the thing is, every time you hit something, you lose rage, right? That means if you play Cyclone with Chainbreaker, it's like bad, because Cyclone has like freaking 10 attacks per second, and you're just gonna like deplete your rage like almost instantly, right? Or at least very fast. While on the other hand, if you have a damage over time like Bane, how I used to play it with like Chainbreaker, my Pathfinder, the Bane Blight Pathfinder, it's a damage over time, it does not hit. So I never degen the rage from it unless I have Berserk up, right? And now it's now adding a rage cost to skill. So every time I would use Bane, I basically lose 3 rage, or at least, yeah, I lose 3 rage, right? So every time I spam it, I lose, which is a big nerf to like damage over time things that are actually using Chainbreaker. But in the other hand, it buffs other mechanics, for example, Blade Vortex, for example, right? Because Blade Vortex, you have to like recast every, like with Unleash, you recast like every, I don't know, 4 or 5 seconds or so. So only if you use the skill, you would actually lose the rage, and not like with an Exploded Chest, for example, that you lose permanently on hit rage, basically, right? So I think the overall change, I mean, in one hand, it nerfs a couple of builds. In the other hand, it makes a lot of other builds more viable, which I think is great for the build variety overall. Then mana reservation skills like auras can now be activated while not having mana. This is actually a change that I would have loved to be in the game for like so long, cause usually, you know, when you like how you say, by mistake, deactivated an aura and you had to wait until you get mana to actually activate it again. Like, now you don't have that, right? So if your mana is empty and you have, you're able to reserve anger, for example, 50%, then it will just reserve that 50% without having actually 50% mana. So this is just a lot quality of life on this part. Then Atlas passive balance. Certain Atlas passive granted too many rewards compared to others. Need to wait for patch notes. So I wrote this down because obviously if we compare the most like common farming methods from last league, since that was kind of new, right, with the Atlas passives. So we had the Valdo's Rest farming, we had the Delirium farming in like tower maps or the canyon maps, which is also like Valdo's Rest with all the harbingers, and there's other regions where nobody had the feeling of like running any of these maps because it was just not as rewarding. So what GG is doing here, they are nerfing the overtuned rewards from certain things. So I guess the Harbinger pack's gonna get nerfed, for example, alongside other things that are too profitable. But in the other hand, they are actually buffing these the kind of sources that were underperforming in based on rewards, right? So I think harvest crafting will still be there, but since harvest changes are gonna apply, I think it's not going to be too relevant anymore to farm those because of like, yeah, you still have 40 crafting station, but it's about the deterministic crafting that got removed or partly removed, so I don't think that's going to be the biggest of a profit on that part. So Vaal skills, this is also a very interesting part. Damaging Vaal skills had their soul gain prevention times lowered relative to the duration of Vaal skills. So if you remember about the Vaal builds that I played in the past with like the permanent Vaal Arc, Vaal Fireball, Vaal Blight, Vaal everything basically, right? There were like two mechanics built in. One is the amount of souls needed to cast that spell. The other one, the more important one, is the soul gain prevention, which is basically the time after you use a Vaal skill, the time that you need to actually get souls again, right? And since the announcement of Ultimatum League, it was more like, yo, we lowered the cost, or at least we hired the amount of souls that you get, right? But that still doesn't affect the soul gain prevention, which is the important factor over here to make pure Vaal builds, for example, right? But here they're actually doing something with it, and we need to wait for patch notes and stuff to see how big is the value change, and if we might actually be able to go back to like pure Vaal builds, which I would very welcome here. So we have reduced the Vaal soul requirements, or increased the numbers of uses on Vaal skills that had relatively lower impact per use compared to other Vaal skills. So this is just like that one Vaal skill just had 10 soul uses, another one had 15, but the one that had 15 soul cost had like 10 times more damage than the one with 10, so they lowered this one to just balance it out a little bit more. So the skills that are not as impactful just need less souls to actually use, right? Then a big change, Righteous Fire spell damage buff has been nerfed. So almost every single build that I know that is a spellcaster and is an actual good build is using Vaal Righteous Fire. Not like as Righteous Fire in that case that you permanently have it up. It's more like, yo, I'm about to hit a boss, I just pop my Vaal Righteous Fire, I get like a bazillion extra damage and just nuke bosses. So they want to get away from that one. And it's still an option, right? But it's not as strong anymore. But therefore, they are actually buffing the damage of Righteous Fire, which is kind of interesting. Because Righteous Fire used to be like a meta skill, like back in the days. Nowadays, the only, like, even, like, there are a few builds that can purely play Righteous Fire. And I think they need, like, quite a lot of investment to be viable for doing all endgame bosses. But mostly, Righteous Fire is used to just buff your actual main skill, right? And they're gonna release new Vaal skill uniques. So basically, we have no info about that, right? But maybe there are some uniques that we could take advantage of to actually make a comeback of Vaal Arc, for example. I'm really looking forward to those. Then we have skill balance changes. That's actually big. Nerfs to Blade Vortex, Blade Blast, Toxic Rain, General's Cry, Seismic Cry, Carrion Golems, and Vitality. So, how to say that the easiest way? There is always a meta, right? And we know that the meta, for example, Necromancer and this Assassin that is throughout the past couple of leagues, even after the nerfs, they're still like the most favorite ascendancies for players, right? As well as Blade Vortex, Blade Blast, and those kind of things, right? There's like a lot of people are playing those skills, and there is always a reason why do people play those skills. And mostly it's because either they're overtuned or they're like super cheap and give like way more power than compared to other skills, right? And yeah, it will piss off a lot of people to have those skills nerfed, but on the other hand, it's all for the greater good about build variety, and then people with their off-meta builds can actually make good builds as well, just because the meta builds all get nerfed. Like, we have no damage numbers, maybe it's like a minor change, maybe like a 5% nerf, maybe I don't know, like 30% damage nerf. We're gonna see about that in the patch notes. But still, as I say, those skills are just heavily overused, I would say, right? Even though General's Cry, I never touched that one. So, and Carrion Golems got another nerf, which is kind of questionable because they got pretty hard nerfed, as well as the Aura Stacker version of Carrion Golem with nerfing the Aura Stacker as well, right? But in one hand, you could say we nerf Carrion Golems. In the other hand, you could actually say let's buff zombies again or other minion builds, right? So I'm not sure. I haven't played Carrion Golem since quite a time, so I don't know where is the current state and how good are they, and if the nerf is actually good or not. Then Frostbomb with Wave of Conviction lowered exposure, because it's like exposure gives you a lot of extra damage by lowering the enemy resistance, and it's just so easy to apply those two things when a cast for damage taken setup or other things. So it's just a little bit of a fine-tuning over here, which is good. Then Flesh and Stone, mana reservation from 25 to 35%, and added reduction points on the tree. So we don't know how much this reduction will be active, so it's just to balance it out a little bit, right? Because Flesh and Stone, I use that on my Blade Vortex Poison Assassin, for example, just as a defensive layer if you're in Sand Stance, for example, right? And I think it gave like too much of a defense option. So lowering or hiring the mana reservation will make you able, or at least not make you able to use other auras in, for example. But the question is, how effective are the points in the tree? We have to wait for patch notes. Then Vigilant Strike and the Jewel lowered the duration of Fortify. I mean, I've never used Vigilant Strike. I'm a softcore player, so I think it's not really necessary for me to do so, because if I die, I die. I mean, it happens, you know. But I've seen other hardcore players having like Vigilant Strike on their weapon swap, and they like have Fortify for like 45 seconds or so. It's kind of ridiculous, but I cannot really give an opinion because I never used that one, right? Divergent Berserk nerfed from 1% more spell damage per quality to 0.25, which is a big damage nerf, but it had to get nerfed. Like, every time I think about a spellcaster, the first thing I do, how often will my build hit? So can I sustain rage? And the second one is how much more spell damage do I get, basically, right? Because I think Divergent Berserk, with adding an like enhanced support and level of socketed gems on your corruption on your item, for example, you get hilarious amounts of more spell damage. And I think it's way too overpowered. Like, it is what it is, right? For example, if you go low life and you take Pain Attunement, you get 30% more spell damage, but you have to be on low life. You have to like work around that, about the negative sides, either with the Chevron's wrappings and energy stacking, or now with the Petrifying Blood and stuff, right? But you have a downside. Like, where is the downside of going Divergent Berserk? And in the other hand, like, there are minor downsides, but in the other hand, how much percent more spell damage did you get? Like, I think 50% with the right setup, which is like almost twice as good as low life without like big how you say, negative aspects, right? And we still have Berserk. It's not about only the damage that we get, it's about the less damage taking, it's about the more movement speed. So for the super speed builds like my Bane Blight Pathfinder, so yeah, had to get nerfed. It is now nerfed. I mean, nerfing it by basically 75% is rough, but I think it's not only spell damage, it also is about the less damage taking. So overall, I think this is the right choice because, like, low life, as I said, is 30%, and you have a downside, and here you actually get less damage taking on top of that and movement speed. So it's just stupid that it actually gives you like almost twice as much damage as the low life version did, right? Then general balance changes. It's all nerfs. Like, I mean, this is all about nerfs. This game balance manifesto. And as I said, I always try to look at the positive side of things and for the greater good of the game, and not what is my own thinking about it, right? So, of course, I don't like all the changes. I do sometimes disagree with the changes, but only if it affects me, right? On the other things, I don't really care because it didn't affect me, right? And that's why I say, like, it's better to take a look at the greater good of the game and how it will develop in the future, especially now when it comes to Path of Exile 2, right? So, general balance, Quivers and caster offense. Critical strike chance, multiplier, dot multi, and chain modifiers on quivers now only apply to attacks or bow skills, which is a hefty nerf. But in the other hand, like, if you want to go max damage, right? So let's say you have a normal character, right? You have like I don't know, like a scepter, a wand, and a shield, right? Then what is the best way to gain more damage? Low life, as shafts, for example, 30% more damage for casters, right? But in the other hand, like, what is the best thing to scale the damage afterwards is going a bow as a stat stick. And if we take a look at all these Fire Blade Vortex or a lot of other builds, my dot builds as well, Essence Drain, like, to get the most damage, I have to use a bow and a quiver as a caster. So just from that point of view, it doesn't really make sense why it is so strong. Because, like, obviously, right, the bow is a 6-link. And a staff is also 6-link, and we're probably gonna get somewhere. I mean, on the staff I can have more stuff for caster related, right? That I cannot have on a bow. But to be honest, now with a multi-modded stuff and just essence spamming for +1 gems and stuff like that, then I still have a quiver that gives me life, resistance, damage, energy shield, whatever I need, right? And I think the combination of bow and quiver is like way more stronger than just having a staff, and I think that's a great change, even though it will nerf a lot of builds in terms of damage output or raw power. But why should it, like, why is a caster, a wizard, running around with a bow, you know? Just from that stand of view, it totally makes sense here, right? So, next, super big change. Physical explosion body armors will no longer be 100% chance to explode, waiting for numeric values on patch notes. Oof. Okay, so no more 100% X-Flow, which sucks. Okay, I do get that. We don't have values that yet. We only know that it's like explode for 1/10 of their life. So actually, nowadays it's I think 3% of the life, and the elevated mod is 5%. Now it's 10%, which is doubling the damage, right? But the thing is, how low is it going to get, right? And I expect it somewhere about 30%. The reason for that is Occultist. Occultist has the cursed enemies explode, I think like 40% chance, and with the obliteration ones you could get up to like almost 60% or so to let enemies explode. And to be honest, it sounds rough, right? But to be honest, my Occultist, the Bane Pop, for example, didn't use an Explode chest. It was pure the Bane Pops, or at least the Occultist Pops with Profane Bloom. And I could demolish 2 screens with that, right? And if you put in other things like chance to ignite proliferation, some sort of things, you're gonna have massive screen clears as well. So, yeah, not everything will explode, but if the monster density is right, you will still explode 2 screens, you know? So, I don't, like... Please don't judge me too hard. Just comparison from the Explode chest to the Occultist. While the Occultist has only 40% chance to explode, it's not too big of a difference. I mean, there is a difference, but I don't think it's like, yo, Explode chest is dead, right? I don't think so. Then, Harvest Monster Life. This is just nerf for corpse exploding build to reduce base life of monsters. Overall will not change due to increased life modifiers on the map or on the harvest and whatnot. This is just to prevent people from like only taking Harvest Monster. It's like I'm not playing Necromancer. I don't even have an idea what Spectres are doing. It's just not my type of builds, so I cannot really give a good statement. But it seemed like that people always took Harvest Monsters as base for their what was it? corpse production, more or less, right? Because these monsters had like way more life, and therefore your specters or the things that you want to explode had like a lot more damage or something like that. So this is just a nerf to something that should not be there actually, or shouldn't be there in the past, right? Hexproof. Modifiers that allow your hexes to affect hexproof enemies, such as cosplays, well, unique body armor, no longer allows your hexes to affect yourself while you have hexproof. Which the only thing I'm thinking about, I think there was a change back in the days. I'm not a fan of self-curse headhunter builds. I'm really not. I always like builds that work with and without headhunter, just as a plug and play item, right? And not a build that is purely based around hexproof, or at least like headhunter. So I'm a little bit off the topic here, but I think that there were some changes, and then you only played an occultist as self-curse because you could still apply those buffs. Oh yeah, wait, you stole buffs from the enemies from Headhunter, and some of these buffs made you hexproof, and that's why your self-curse did not apply anymore, right? Something like that. But there were ways to play around that, and this was, I think, the occultist, and now this is basically gone, so I don't know how that will look out for the new self-curse Headhunter builds. As I said, I haven't played these kind of builds for quite some time now, and I'm off, and I will not even thinking of playing one again, because I think it's just not the way it should be played, so I cannot really say too much about it. But just from this state that I have right now, I think a lot of like the self-curse temp chains build, we're gonna have a nerf applied. Poison Sextant, really good change. The Sextant modifier, which granted players increased damage and movement speed for each poison on them, has been removed. New self-poison unique for damage and movement speed with capped values. So that's another thing, right? I think that the self-poison Sextant modifier is vastly overpowered. And not only because it's easy to get with just rolling a couple of Sextant modifiers, it's also about the maps where you could enchant the harvest. Like, maps do not consume the enchanted modifier, right? Or Sextant modifier. That basically means you roll it one single time and you have it forever. And what do you get by self-poisoning is like 1000% of movement speed and damage, and like a friend of mine is really loving to play that on his custom crit Cyclone, and he's boosting his damage to like 1 billion, right? And especially on League Start, where people don't have a lot of gear and they run around like 10x gear or something, and they're actually able to run 100% Delirious just because of this poison modifier. So they wouldn't run a T16 map without poisoning, right? But they can, because they get so much damage and movement speed, so they one-shot everything. And I don't know, even when I played self-poison, I never used the Sextant modifier, because I think it's vastly overpowered. And now they removed it, so I'm happy for that change. And don't get me wrong, guys, it's not like that I'm a fan of everything they do, right? And it's kind of hard to say, because if you like to play with this Sextant Poison modifier, and here is Mr. mbX making a video like how great it is to remove that, and I'm not against it's such a weird topic. I'm surely gonna get some shitstorm over there, right? But I'm just saying, like, this Poison Sextant modifier is the same stupid thing as self-curse Headhunter builds that are utterly trash if they wouldn't, take advantage of, like, Headhunter or self-poison, more or less, right? Because if the self-poison modifier is not on the map, they never gonna run or be able to run 100% Delirious map, right? It's just a form of abusing Sextant modifiers or Headhunter and other things, right? Good. Fractured Fossils and Beast Splitting. The next big change here. Splitting an item through Beast Crafting now applies a split tag to both items, similar to Mirrored. We have seen that change already in the preview of the content reveal, but now items that have Fractured Fossils used on them also gain the split tag. Split items cannot be split again and can not have imprints made of them applied to them. So basically, that means all these, I have the perfect map. I have my Blight Enchanted 100% Delirious Canyon map with like Nemesis Fractured or Beyond and whatnot. I have this one map. The map itself cost me 30x, right? But what I can do now, I just buy Fractured Fossil and I run the same map over and over and over and over again. The same is like with this, yo, I'm the guy, I invest currency to get the first 6 white socket astral plate, and then I can charge people for making a copy of it, right? And I'm gonna flood the market, and everybody is taking those items, right? In the greater good, these items get ridiculously cheap. Like last league, there was like a 6 white astral plate 6 link was like 2.5 exalts, I think. 2.5, 2 exalts. So just the cost of linking an item is like way more expensive than what you get here, and it's already 6 white sockets, right? And the same is like with this mapping or like fracture fossil mapping, but just copying over and over again. I personally think it's just duping, and duping in a game like an ARPG, whether it's like Diablo 2 back in the days or now Path of Exile, I think everything that dupes, I think the only thing that actually should be able to dupe is a Mirror of Kalandra. So yeah, it's going to be a ridiculous nerfs to this 0.1% player base that just run 100% Delirium. It will not affect a lot of people, right? But it will affect a certain amount of player base, so I just, it's going to be ridiculous, right? So I think the prices, that the market prices of certain items is gonna get ridiculous. Like, imagine if you cannot like Fracture Fossil all those 100% Delirious maps, the prices of Delirium orbs, right? They're gonna get insanely overpriced. The same as like simulacrums, for example. I think I can already tell that farming simulacra is gonna be insanely profitable, and it's probably gonna be one of my early farming projects, more or less. I think so. When we're gonna see actually what other Atlas changes are there, right? But it's going to like kill the entire market as we know it, and it's kind of interesting, and I am looking forward to that one, how everything turns out. So, Atlas mission sustained. Removed bonus mission chance from awakening bonus objectives. Need more missions. Prepare your Atlas passives for it. So, yeah. As somebody that always runs missions and for going for this awakening bonus objectives all the time, you just over-sustained that. And it was barely like every map you got like an Atlas mission, or every second map, right? With the daily resets and stuff like that, and harvest crafting, where you could get harvest missions like, yo, sacrifice a map and get Atlas missions based to the appropriate tier like 3 times and stuff like that. You get so many master missions, and I think it's an okay change, I guess. So, and if you still want to have more master missions, you could still prepare your Atlas with the Atlas passives, right? With the skill tree. Delirium item quantity and rarity. Item quantity and rarity granted by Delirium Fog got capped and nerfed. Yeah. Cannot really say too much about that. Like, the most profitable way of farming the game was 100% Delirious maps, max juice. Like, we saw people getting like 10 exalts out of a single map just because of all the quantity and the monsters, like thousands of monsters. This will probably reduce it a little bit, but will it have a massive impact? I think it's still going to be the best farming method for endgame, more or less. Passive tree changes, small numerical nerfs to several cluster jewels, notables that grant area of effect, skill effect, duration, aura effect, and projectile speed. Most interesting here, area of effect and aura effect. Aura effect, another nerf to aura stacker. And if you say, why is that? Aura stacker is that? No, it's not, right? It was, the entrance cost was even higher than in previous leagues, but you could still get your 400% aura effect to make aura stackers like insanely strong. And there was a lot of people actually achieving that last league with some glorious vanity stuff or something like that, and now more aura effect. So I think they really want to get it to a point where you cannot reach 400% to get 90% all res and stuff like that. And area of effect, like most assassins, I would say, with like cast and crit and things like that, are using vast power and magnifier, which are like the go-to cluster jewel passives for area of effect stacking. So I guess those two nodes are gonna get changed or nerfed a little bit. So it's just about AoE scaling, right? So skill effect duration, I don't think of any mandatory thing, and projectile speed neither. But as I said, area of effect, all the assassin AoE builds, Explode Chest, Herald of Ice, Herald of Ash, whatever, big explosions, a bit of a change there, and aura effect as well as the nerf to the aura stacker. Then Immortal Ambitions Keystone, life leech effects, recover energy shield instead of life while on full life. Stat is now limited by maximum total energy shield recovery from leech instead of maximum total life recovery from leech. Okay, so that basically means that the like you leech life that is affected by your maximum life leech, and after that you leech energy shield. But it used to be that the energy shield that you leeched was just capped by the amount of life leech effect you have. But what they do now is life leech effect, energy shield leech effect, okay? So that means that if you don't have any energy shield enhancing quality on your gear, right, you're just gonna have like an insane life recovery and then a bit of an energy shield recovery just to like balance it out a little bit, I guess. Corrupted Soul Keystone now causes you to gain 15% max life ES as max energy shield. That's a 5% nerf. That's used for a lot of like hybrid builds. I used that on my Auto Bomber, for example, where you get like you split the damage that you get 50% on life, 50% on energy shield, and all you did is actually stacking a lot of energy shield and life stuff and taking life nodes on a tree, and then just use Corrupted Soul among other, like the chest enchant was like also 10% maximum life is extra maximum energy shield, just to have like, I don't know, like 5k life and like 3.5k energy shield and make it really good use out of this hybrid playstyle. And it is like too low investment to get this amount of energy shield. Then Chainbreaker Keystone no longer causes you to lose 5 rage when you hit an enemy, but now instead has skills cost 3 rage. The Keystone allows certain skills that either didn't have, such as Bane, or skills that didn't count as used, such as Totems, Mines, completely bypass the downside. I was talking about that one before, and hey, Chainbreaker Bane. Who was playing Chainbreaker Bane Pathfinder for the past couple of seasons? Oh yeah, it was me. I think, like, okay, I'm probably not the reason. Maybe I took a part of the reason they changed that, right? But as I said, like, this Chainbreaker is too powerful. It got nerfed now anyways. But I think this way opens up for a lot more build variety, and as well as like it wasn't only Bane, it was like Totems and Mines, but I'm like not the biggest Totem and Mines fan, so that's why I never played those. But it's just an obvious change, to be honest. Hardened Scars, ouch. Hardened Scars no longer grants Fortify during Flask effect, instead now grants Fortify while recovering life from a life flask. Ugh. RIP. How often does it happen that you recover life from a life flask? Not a lot, right? Especially not when you play Pathfinder with Agnostic, like my Bane character did, right? That's shitty, that's shitty. Okay, permanent Fortify on Pathfinder is gone. I don't like this, but it was too strong anyways. I mean, I gotta admit it, right? Pathfinder, Agnostic, Hardened Scars, well, like you have this ongoing, what was it, the Hollowed Life Flask, the Hybrid Life Flask, where you gain life and then mana at the end of the flask effect, so you could have like one button press of a flask, you had like 10 seconds Fortify, right? And then you had like things like increased effective Fortify with all the less damage taking. Like, just think about my Pathfinder last league with 2.5k life could face tank Maven. Like, what about these beefy builds, 7k life, armor stacking, right? They cannot face tank, and my little Pathfinder with 2.5k life can, right? Just because of the ridiculous amounts of damage mitigation, and Hardened Scars was one of them, and yeah, that kind of makes me gonna change my league starter because of so many different things happening here in the patch notes. We're gonna see. The Necromancer's asymptotically notable has had the amount of mana regenerated when consumed the corpse lowered from 8% to 4%. I think this is something about Archmage Necromancer build, something like that. I don't know, I'm not playing Necromancers. Primal Aegis from Elementalist Bastion of Elements scale now takes 75 damage per allocated notable skill from 100. I haven't even played an Elementalist after the rework, so I don't even know what Primal Aegis is 100% doing, so, but I guess, hey, it's a nerf, right? But yeah, that's pretty much about it with the nerf festo. It's going to be interesting. Like, I know, please don't hate me just because I say, like, yo, this nerfed, I like it, this nerfed, I like it, this nerfed, I like it, right? I just think, like, there is so many changes going on with all the buffed old league mechanics and all the new life skills and the new ways to discover builds, and the meta builds got nerfed, so all the Reddit people will probably cry a river bigger than the Amazonas, but it is what it is, right? I'm really looking forward because we're not gonna play the same stuff that we played in the past several leagues because of the so-called meta, right? I think it's gonna switch up the meta quite a bit, and it will make a lot of meta builds more viable compared to nowadays standards. Because back in the days, wait, your build doesn't have an explode chest? What trash is that, right? It shouldn't be like that. I want to have, as a player, I want to have the option that I say, yo, I want to go Explo, right? And it's not going to outperform anything else that is not having an Explo. And now with the new ways of low life, and I'm like super hyped about the league. If it's for me, you know, they can change even more, because then the game is like, we can just learn way more things about all these new changes and ways to discover new cool stuff that then get nerfed in future leagues, right? But I'm just hyped. I'm kind of wait until Friday. Just still questionable what leagues are that I'm going to pick, but just hopefully people are not going to be too pissed about all these changes. Because in one hand, yo, Harvest is gone, and the next hand, Explode Chest is nerfed. Like, what is the next thing? You're gonna remove Headhunter from the game? Oh shit! All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.